Welcome to the final session, part 7 of this series on connection-based wellness with Joel Pukalo from Family Life Psychology. Today, he's going to be talking about emotional wellness in our lives and giving us tips and hints in making a plan and moving towards wellness in this area of our lives. So be sure to stay tuned. You're not going to want to miss this. If you haven't checked out the introduction video to this series, you're going to want to make sure you go check that out before continuing on with this video or future videos of this series. The introduction is really going to help you in setting a base up for the topic that Joel's going to be discussing in this next session.
Welcome back to Connection-Based Living. I'm really excited about today's topic in emotional wellness. I think it's an area where there's the potential for the most growth for almost all of us, but it is one of the areas that's the most challenging as well. Sometimes becoming more aware and sitting with our feelings can kind of be scary, can be uncomfortable, and just being honest, for the first couple decades of my life, I think I spent more time trying to avoid my feelings than actually understand them. A common theme or metaphor I always talk about in this area of emotions is if you ever kind of grew up, for me when I was a teenager, I got asked to clean my room and I'd always throw the clothes in the closet in the far corner. And over time those clothes built up and it kind of became a mess, and unfortunately it was kind of gross because some other things got mixed in there and it just was not awesome. So one day I had to clean my room and there was a whole lot of junk that I had to go through. And I think that's a very unfortunate, true metaphor for my life emotionally and for a lot of us too. We typically try to sometimes avoid our emotions, throw things under the rug, stuff them in the corner, avoid things as much as possible until they build up and we can no longer avoid dealing with them. And it kind of reminds me of something I did with my lunch kit a couple years ago as well. I ended up doing a little science experiment and left some food in my car for about a week, and I didn't realize it was in my trunk, and this was over the middle of summer. So as you might imagine, when I opened my trunk, this container of food had turned into a really disgusting science experiment of just a whole bunch of mold. And I think I just almost threw up when I opened the container. It smelled so gross. It's another picture of often what is going on internally for us. Sometimes I work with teens and younger individuals as well, and the metaphor doesn't fit for everyone, but it's such a powerful picture. I talk about it almost whenever I talk about emotions, is the idea of our heart's a bit like a toilet. Of course, you can imagine at your home, if no one at your home flushed the toilet for a month, your heart would be, or the toilet, the whole house would just smell really bad. For those of us who've used an outhouse or something like that, it would just be like that, but in the house. It would reek. It would be terrible. And unfortunately for most of us, if we don't process and talk about our feelings every day, that's what happens internally. Because we don't press the flush button of our heart and actually process and talk about the emotions we've experienced on a day-to-day basis, all that crap builds up, it gets stinky, and we kind of blow up. And an interesting thing to think about is often, anger and frustration. If you think about a cup, people will come talk to me sometimes and say, I need to learn how to better manage my anger. And I always remind them the first step isn't dealing with when the cup is at the top. I've got a water bottle here, and when my water bottle is overflowing, the water is going to come out. But the reason people get upset or we get angry or stressed out is because we allow stuff to build. The small stuff builds and eventually it reaches a tipping point and it blows up. So really the key with emotional wellness is understanding every day the small little things that we feel. Maybe it's disappointment, sadness, frustration, worry, whatever it is, but actually creating space for ourselves every day to be in tune with what's inside of our hearts emotionally is really helpful, because if we can be aware of it and process it, then it doesn't have to get to this tipping point where we're blowing up or breaking down. For some of us, we might have panic attacks. Others might have anger. Some of us might get really sad or depressed or whatever it might be. But often, a lot of sometimes challenges around our mental health is because we're not processing and dealing with our emotions very well. So we're going to be talking about 3 keys today to help us with our emotions: emotional awareness, regulation. Then we'll talk about balancing our emotions with emotion and logic, and as well as with values. The first part is emotional awareness. So internal and external emotional openness is a big part of emotional awareness. Dr. Gordon Neufeld, he's a developmental psychologist in Vancouver. He talks about emotional awareness, expression, and equilibrium. Emotional awareness is just understanding how you feel. Emotional expression is being able to communicate or talk about those feelings, and emotional equilibrium, which we'll talk about later, is being able to mix different types of feelings. The first step is always awareness. I've got to be honest with you guys. I'm not the most emotionally aware person. Thank goodness my wife is very helpful that way, because that is not my strength. And what I found with especially the past 5 years is having an emotions wheel of just checking in with myself and talking about different emotions I've felt throughout the day can be really helpful. So being aware of how we feel, internal emotions, so being open with myself when I'm feeling joy, anger, guilt, sadness, etc. I thought before in life, I should feel happy all the time. So I focused on feeling happy, and if I wasn't feeling happy, I just sweep those emotions under the rug and stuff them for later, throw them in the closet, and they would just build up. And that's exactly what happened. And I think it was about 5 years ago, I actually reached a tipping point where I had so much just emotional junk built up, unprocessed emotion, that I really experienced a very hard time in life, was experiencing anxiety and depression and just a lot of really hard stuff because I'd never learned how to deal with my emotions well. The good news is, if you've experienced similar difficulties as well, there's hope. And the last 5 years has been the most hopeful and most enjoyable part of my life because I learned that emotions don't have to be scary. I don't actually have to run from them. Emotions are here to help me. I always say emotions are kind of like the dashboard of your heart. In a car, of course, you have the dashboard, you have the check engine light that might come on if you're having engine issues, or the seatbelt light if you're not wearing your seatbelt, or the low fuel light if you're running out of gas. Those dashboard signs in your car are helpful, not hurtful. They're not trying to mess with your life. They're actually trying to give you important information about how your car is functioning. If you took a hammer and bashed at all the dashboard lights, you'd be in trouble, because if you didn't know how much gas you'd have in your tank, you'd be on the side of the road out of gas. If you didn't have your seatbelt light bother you to wear your seatbelt, you might get in an accident and be seriously hurt. Of course, if you didn't have engine lights or low tire pressure warnings, you could be on the side of the highway, your engine blows up or your tire blows up, and really bad things could happen. So manufacturers design vehicles with this dashboard of all this important information to help the driver of the vehicle know what the vehicle needs for help. And that's really important, because if we think about ourselves, I really do believe that all of our emotions are helpful. They are given to us for a purpose. Of course, if we don't steward our emotions well, or we block them out, we're going to end up feeling frustrated and not liking some of our emotions like anger, worry, or fear, or anxiety. But at the core, if we learn to listen to them, when the check engine light comes on in the car, you should probably go to the manufacturer, go to the dealership, and have that car looked at, have it serviced, right? So if you're experiencing some worry or anxiety, we have a choice. We can keep just pushing through the day, ignore it, just push through, or we can stop and talk to someone, check in with ourselves and figure out, okay, why am I experiencing this anxiety? Where is it coming from? How can I either solve that situation, deal with it, or surrender it, work on reaching out for help and getting a different perspective? So really learning to acknowledge and tune into our feelings is so powerful, because instead of feeling overwhelmed and scared and running from them, they actually are here as supportive friends who want to give us important information about our day-to-day life. Tuning in invites conversation, invites emotional openness and awareness to learn how to manage and regulate our emotions. Tuning out leads to kind of like this helplessness of always just kind of trying to run from our feelings. So tuning in and creating a space to be emotionally open with ourselves is powerful, but not just with ourselves, other people. Learning to be real with other people about how we feel is equally key. If I just keep all of my thoughts and feelings inside, I'm probably not going to be able to kind of press the flush button, so to speak, and work through them and dump some of these stressors out. I think the number one key in processing our emotions, it's not something we can just do in isolation by ourselves. It really is leaning in our supporting cast, being able to recognize that in our weakness and acknowledging the emotions and the challenges we're facing, we're actually become stronger and more powerful individuals. Even over this last year, there's been a lot of music and songs that have come out about the challenges of emotions that musical artists have gone through. And I love listening to these songs because they're such reminders of the strength that the artists find in sharing their story with others and sharing their story with their listeners, because they're actually feeling more empowered and encouraged as individuals just by sharing. So it's an important thing. As we share our emotions, we're literally being able to kind of press that flush button and dumping some of that stuff out that's stuck inside of us. And I've learned that unless I actually am intentional about checking in and talking to my wife or a couple other close friends about my emotions on an ongoing basis, every day or so, that they're just going to build up. And over the course of a week, the water bottle is going to be full and going to be overflowing, and I'm going to be having a much harder time with my emotions. So being able to have that external and internal openness with processing my feelings is very key. Also being able to identify root causes. Sometimes we feel anxiety, we feel frustration, and it's hard to know why. So going to the root. Is it something that's happening right now, or maybe is it related to some other events that have happened in my life as well? I think one thing for me, sometimes I feel anxiety and I get worried about getting in trouble. And I've never done anything wrong. I haven't gotten in trouble with the law or really with anything in my life, but I've had some unhealthy people who have been influential or in charge of my life in different ways, and they've been very unkind. They made me feel very unsafe. So whenever I have the potential of those people being in my life again, I feel very threatened, and I can very easily feel unsafe or feel fearful because of some past experiences. And I have to recognize what I'm experiencing now is not the issue. It's actually these root issues that I haven't fully dealt with in terms of feeling unsafe and the scary experiences that I have gone through as a person that are really coming to the surface and just fears about small and kind of random things today. So really identifying root issues and core issues throughout our lives of why we feel the way we do. That's kind of like an iceberg. We have these emotions on top, and often surface emotions would be kind of like anger, secondary emotions. But below the surface, we often might feel sad or unsafe or different kind of more core emotions that are really deep throughout our experiences in our lives. So that emotional awareness invites the opportunity to emotionally express ourselves to others. And through that, we come to emotional equilibrium where we can feel joyful and we can also feel sad. We mix those together. We can feel helped, and times we didn't feel helped or supported either. And a really beautiful picture of this is it's a kid's movie, but it really portrays it powerfully. It's the movie Inside Out. At the end of the movie, the main character, Riley, she was forced to move from her home in Minnesota with her parents. They were living in another city, and she was very sad about it. And she got so sad that her whole sadness disappeared. She just became very angry and upset. And even though her parents were trying to talk to her and get through to her, she was just so upset she ended up running away. And her brain was kind of offline, and she was having such struggles because she couldn't connect with the different types of emotions within her. Her kind of whole internal world, as the movie portrayed it, was shut down. But yet we see as the movie progresses and kind of reaches the climax, the tipping point, Riley is able to somehow reconnect with these memories that she had from Minnesota, these past positive memories, and she kind of shares them with her parents. And we literally see in the movie the mixing of blue and sad kind of memories and moments with these happy, joyful moments, and the coming together of these different memories, the equilibrium, the reconciling of feeling both sad and these positive past memories at the same time of these experiences came together, and her whole heart came back online. And it's a beautiful picture, I think, for a lot of us of really what our journey is in life, as we are able to mix different emotions and feel the times that we really did go through those sorrows, but also the joys as those emotions mix. It's so powerful in helping us connect and process our emotions effectively, and it also helps in emotional regulation. As we really develop the awareness of how we're feeling and we can express how we're feeling, it's much easier to become more emotionally regulated and understanding when we're having a hard time, that we need to take breaks and have specific signs and what it feels like in our bodies, what we're thinking in our mind, and even what might look like behaviorally when we know we're kind of at our limits. For me, I can get pretty dysregulated. I can get pretty fidgety. I can get antsy. And when we first got married, my wife would say, "Hey, Joel, I think you're kind of like in the yellow zone or kind of dysregulated. Maybe you should go for a walk or take a little break before we hang out, Another kind of warning sign is my mind. I kind of tend to get fixated or stuck on the same thinking pattern. And I know when I get in that mode, I'm just having a really hard time. So I know I need to press pause, stop my thinking, and kind of reach out and talk to someone. And in doing that, I end up feeling a lot more regulated and recognizing those limits. And when I can do both recognizing my limits and aware of how I'm doing, I have much more regulated communication, especially with my wife. It's our loved ones that bring out the best in us and the worst in us. And I think especially those we're closest to or those we live with, we might have a little bit less tolerance or grace for. So it's really important, especially if we're living in the same house with people. Even over this last year, it can be quite challenging to tune in and recognize what are those warning signs or limits in ourselves and other people in our home when we need to kind of take a break, press pause, do some regulation strategies, and come back to that particular topic later. Mixing emotion and logic can also be really powerful because sometimes when our limbic system takes over, it's trying to keep us safe. And we're feeling a lot of big emotions. We're trying to get in self-protection mode, and we can get easily defensive, and we're not really thinking logically or clearly at that time. Our prefrontal cortex is kind of offline, and we're not really able to logically perceive the situation. So mixing some logic by kind of looking at the size of our problem and the size of reaction, So for example, just the other day, my daughter brought some muddy shoes into the house, and I like to keep the house clean. So I was like, oh my goodness, this is so stressful. But I'm like, Joel, this is not a big problem. This is a small problem. Your daughter doesn't know any better. Take a deep breath. We'll work through this together. So recognizing the size of problem, and then trying to pick an appropriate size reaction. Even yesterday, my wife and I were trying to wash the dishes and clean the kitchen, and we had very differing opinions on how we're going to do that. So it seemed like we're having a medium reaction to something that really could easily be a small problem. So we both agreed, okay, let's press pause. Let's take a minute here, just step back, and let's talk about this again in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. So really knowing how to press pause and have regulated communication is really important in the area of emotional management. And balancing facts and feelings and looking at externalizing versus personalizing. So, okay, we can easily personalize, like my wife's just trying to micromanage me about these dishes that we were talking about yesterday, but she just wanted them clean and I wasn't doing the best job. So it's not personal, it's external. She just wants clean dishes and I can do that. We talked a little bit about this in a previous session, underlying wants and needs, recognizing in a situation where we're communicating with someone else, what's understandable from the other person's perspective. It's understandable. My wife wants clean dishes. That's fair. Her underlying want or need is she needs to know that I'm doing the dishes properly so that they're cleaned. That's legit. I can agree with that. I don't really like when she tells me things or micromanages me, but she's coming from a really understandable place. And honestly, that's on me. I just need to learn how to do the dishes a little bit better. So being able to look externally at a situation, logically at a situation, and look from the other person's perspective at what might be understandable is really, really key. The final piece that really helps me, I think it's helped me and a lot of people I've worked with so much, we could spend a whole session on this, is values, connecting emotions with values. So understanding our personal values. There's lots of information you can look up online about values, and I do a lot of values work with clients I work with to specifically understand what are some of their most important values. Some of my most important values are adventure, I would say acceptance, kindness, love, and probably humor as well. So those are some of my key values. So when I think about my emotions and guiding myself through different situations, how can I allow values to guide the way I express myself to other people, and how also I can think about my own circumstances? Because I tend to get so caught up in my thoughts and feelings, it's like a whirlwind. There's this kind of narrative or story about pilots. They have really small planes. And back in the day when they were flying these really small planes, if there was a really bad storm, they'd get disoriented. And they'd actually think they were flying upside down when they were just flying normally. So they're so disoriented and confused, they actually flip their plane upside down and end up crashing. And I think it's called spatial disequilibrium or something of that nature. And when that happens to us emotionally, sometimes we get so caught up in our thoughts and feelings that we can't see clearly. We get disoriented, we get all turned around, and we end up kind of crashing or kind of being able to just either shut down, get in fight or flight mode because we're so offline from seeing the situation clearly. So what can be really helpful in the midst of emotional and mental storms is to check in with our values and allow them to be the guiding compass. So if I asked myself yesterday in just that random situation, small situation with my wife, okay, how can I be accepting? How can I be kind? How can I be loving? How can I even be humorous and adventurous in this situation? And that really helps me on a day-to-day basis navigate my emotions, because when I'm frustrated or upset or feel to have some worries and stuff like that, I come back to, okay, Joel, what kind of person do you want to be? How can you allow your values to be the guiding compass or focal point of my life? When I get upset, I think about how I can be kind to myself and kind to the people around me, and even how I can, as appropriate, add a bit of humor and be more adventurous and actually have fun instead of just fight about stuff, whether it be with friends or family. The other piece is anxiety. I tend to struggle a lot with anxiety throughout my life. And I ask myself, how much time do I want to spend or allot to thinking and feeling about these things that I'm worried about? Imagine this cup again, or this water bottle being our emotional bank account for the day. How much emotional energy do we want to allot to worries, stressors, getting mad at people, things that really don't matter? And how much of this emotional energy do I want to allot to things that are really important? Spending time with my kids, communicating with my wife, communicating with my friends. And if I can really tune into my values and recognize what's most important, I want to conserve my emotional energy for what's most important. I've got a bunch of stressors in my life. I've got a bunch of frustrations. There's lots of different emotions going on for me on a daily basis. But I really want to focus in on, just like the big rocks, put the most important things first and conserve emotional and mental energy for what's most important in my life. And as I connect my values of adventure, of fun, of kindness, of love, I can really tune into and be like, this emotional energy I really want to allot for those most important things in life. There's lots of sand. There's always a lot of things that will drain our energy or kind of fill our cup up with stressors, with anxieties, with frustrations, all those things. But I don't want those to be the main parts of my life. And sometimes it's really hard. It's very hard to change our thoughts and feelings. And that's why I always say start with kind of one first practical step. And I think the first practical step is really focusing on what really are your values and what's most important to you as a person. Who do you want to save that emotional energy for, and how do you want to spend your emotional energy? You're not going to be perfect at it. You'll get sidetracked and things will come up and you'll get frustrated and waste emotional energy on this or that. But really starting from that point of what's most important and who do I want to invest and what do I want to invest my emotional energy into, I would say that's step one. And then very practically, step two, if you have your phone or a piece of paper, really creating space, setting a timer every day to talk with yourself or other people, whether it be journaling or chatting with other people about your emotions. That emotional awareness piece is so key. So just checking in with yourself one or two times a day and really actually talking about your feelings. Whether it's with a spouse or partner or someone else in your life, it's really key. So I would say every day we have all these different things kind of coming up in our lives that would want to fill us up emotionally. So being able to really make sure we're conserving space for the most important things and the less important things, that we're being consistent to kind of talk about, process, and let's just say pour out or flush out of our lives. Visually, you can see it here, so we don't get stuck. So we don't have this big buildup and backup of unprocessed emotions that can literally bring us down. It can weigh us down. It can lead to complex mental health challenges because we just have this buildup of very unprocessed emotion. And of course, there's biological aspects of just brain chemistry and things that cause mental health challenges. There's external factors. But I would say one of the most important factors to consider for most people who come to counseling that I've worked with, and I believe most people in the world, including myself, is unprocessed emotion. If we don't process our emotions, it makes all the other areas of wellness suffer. It could negatively impact our physical wellness, our mental wellness, our relational wellness. It just spreads to all these other areas. So it's a tough area to figure out. It's a tough area to journey in, but I just encourage you to really give that your full attention and have these ongoing discussions. There's some areas where we focus on some very specific keys and work through them and set some practical goals. I feel like emotions is this ongoing journey of just creating space every day to process our emotions and to really grow and understanding how we can express them in a constructive way that really is able to balance that logic and values with our emotions. Our emotions are wonderful friends. They're very supportive when they are guided and directed and grounded in our logic and values. So having that balance. If they're not guided and directed, I always say that emotions are really great passengers. They're really great dashboard warning sign in our car. They give us really important information, but emotions are not fun if they're driving the car. If your emotions are in charge of your life, it does not feel fun and you might not like your emotions. And can I just encourage you that they're there for a reason. They're trying to help and support, but without the support and oversight of the more logical aspects of ourselves and the more values-driven aspects of ourselves, emotional struggle is inevitable. So the good news is we don't have to stay there. If we can tune into our values and tune into some very practical strategies to guide and support our emotions, we can journey through them and really allow our emotions to become that helpful dashboard that give us important information and warning signs as things come up in our lives. And as we fully embrace our emotions and allow them to become the dashboard of our lives, they can become very helpful friends instead of scary things that we run from.
Thank you for watching this final video in our series on connection-based wellness. We hope that you got a lot out of it. If you haven't checked out the earlier videos, I would encourage you to do that in the playlist on our homepage. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe to this channel, as we'll be having other mental health professionals coming in throughout the course of this year, and we'll be releasing new videos covering various topics. And so you want to be sure that you catch those in moving towards a better place of mental health in your life. Thank you so much for watching this video.